What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Jorge's House of Horrors, where we peel back the curtain on the terrifying tales that shaped modern folklore and shine a light on the shadowy figures behind them. I'm your host, Jorge, and tonight we're kicking off a brand new series diving into the world of demonologists, haunted dolls, and cursed homes. But before we get into the gory details of ghost stories and poltergeist infestations, we need to meet the couple who made it all mainstream. They've been called saints, charlatans, heroes, hoaxers, and the most controversial figures in paranormal history. You've heard their names whispered in the dark, now let's bring them into the spotlight. This is the story of Ed and Lorraine Warren, how they met, what they believed, and how they changed the way America sees the supernatural. From supernatural sweethearts and celebrities, it all starts in Bridgeport, Connecticut in the 1940s. Ed Warren grew up in a supposedly haunted house. He claimed to see shadowy figures and glowing lights as a child, experiences that shaped his lifelong belief in the paranormal. Lorraine Warren, his future wife, said she could see auras and communicate with spirits from a certain age. She didn't talk about it much growing up. In Catholic school, that kind of talk wasn't just weird, it was dangerous. Ed joined the Navy at 17 during World War II, and Lorraine waited for him. They married in 1945, just after the war ended. By then, Ed had discovered two passions, painting and the supernatural. Lorraine supported them by working as a telephone operator while Ed took art classes under the GI Bill. But it wasn't long before their hobbies took a spooky turn. Ed began painting haunted houses, and when I say haunted houses, I mean literal homes that were supposedly infested by ghosts or demons. Lorraine would help him research local legends. They would then show up at the house, and Ed would sketch it, and they'd knock on the door. If the owners bit, Lorraine would offer a reading, connecting with the spirits inside. A bit unorthodox, sure, but heck, it worked. This oddball husband and wife team quickly gained a reputation in New England's spiritualist circles. In 1952, they founded the New England Society for Psychic Research, or NESPR, a group devoted to studying ghosts, hauntings, and demonic forces. It was the first organization of its kind in the U.S., and it gave them a veneer of scientific credibility, even though their methods were anything but conventional. God, demons, and a war for souls? Yeah, why not? The Warrens weren't just hobbyist ghost hunters. They saw themselves as soldiers in a cosmic war between good and evil. Ed wasn't an ordained priest, but he considered himself a demonologist, one of the only laymen recognized by the Catholic Church in that role, though the church never officially endorsed him. Lorraine was a trance medium and clairvoyant. She believed she could see spirits, read auras, and communicate with otherworldly forces. They weren't looking for lost keys or wayward spirits, they were looking for demons. The Warrens believed many hauntings were actually cases of demonic infestation, a process that started with oppression and ended with full-on possession. And there was only one way to stop it: faith, prayer, and intervention. That formula, oppression, possession, exorcism, would become their trademark, and it would guide every major case they touched for the next 50 years. Their big break came in 1971 with the Perron family haunting in Harrisville, Rhode Island. If you've seen The Conjuring, you already know the Hollywood version, but the real story is a little bit murkier. The parents claimed to be plagued by a violent spirit. Doors slammed, objects flew. The mother was supposedly attacked by unseen forces. The Warrens swooped in, conducted seances, and declared the house demon-infested. The case became the blueprint for dozens more: the Amityville Horror, the Enfield Poltergeist, Annabelle the Doll, the Snedeker Funeral Home, and more. Each followed a similar pattern: terrified families, escalating disturbances, and the Warrens stepping in as spiritual commandos. They weren't just investigating ghosts, they were selling a narrative, and that narrative sold. Big time. In the basement of their modest Monroe, Connecticut home, the Warrens built a shrine to their career. The Warren Occult Museum became a place of pilgrimage for believers. Inside, cursed dolls, demonic masks, haunted artifacts, each with a laminated plaque and spine-chilling backstory. The most famous? Annabelle, a supposedly possessed Raggedy Ann doll kept locked in a glass case, flanked by a crucifix and a do not touch sign. Today, that doll's been immortalized in multiple Hollywood films, but the real object, it's a weathered plush toy, less terrifying, more antique than what you see in the movies. Still, visitors claim to feel dizziness and nausea and even attacked after looking at her. The museum gave physical weight to their stories. It made it more tangible. It also kept people talking and kept the legend alive. But not everyone bought what the Warrens were selling. Many critics, including academics and journalists and fellow paranormal investigators, have accused them of sensationalism and outright fraud. James Randi, the magician and professional skeptic, publicly challenged the Warrens' credibility. He called their work a dangerous mix of religious propaganda and theatrical storytelling. Benjamin Radford of Skeptical Inquirer noted how the Warrens' stories often change over time, with details growing more dramatic as book and movie deals loomed. Former collaborators like Guy Leon Playfair, who investigated the Enfield case, said the Warrens showed up, stayed briefly, and exaggerated their involvement in what became the Conjuring 2 film. Even some families involved in their cases later claimed they were pressured or manipulated into supporting the Warrens' narrative. That's not to say they didn't experience something strange, but whether it was demonic, psychological, or exaggerated for fame is still up for debate. So, what do we do with Ed and Lorraine Warren? They weren't scientists, they weren't clergy, they operated in a gray area between religion, showmanship, and the human need to explain the unexplainable. Were they sincere believers doing what they thought was right, or skilled storytellers capitalizing on fear? Maybe both. One thing's certain, they knew how to build a brand. Long before hashtags and horror franchises, the Warrens created a universe, and it's one that's still expanding. Their legacy lives on not just in Hollywood, but in every amateur ghost hunting team with a GoPro and a rosary. Love them or loathe them, they help define what a modern haunting looks like. So, what do you think? Were the Warrens spiritual warriors fighting evil, or expert myth makers cashing in on fears? And if this episode did give you chills or made you question your nightlight usage, hit that like button, smash subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss the next chapter in our deep dive. I'm Jorge, and this is Jorge's House of Horrors. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Jorge's House of Horrors, your home for real chills, deep dives, and stories that are blurring the line between folklore and fact. I'm your host, Jorge, and tonight we're going to head into the most infamous haunted house in American history, right? You've seen the house. Red windows, like eyes, sitting quiet on a sleepy street in Long Island. It's inspired more than a dozen films, books, parodies, and at least one very weird episode of The Simpsons. But behind the pop culture legend is a real tragedy, a sensational story, and a major question. Was the Amityville Horror a demonic haunting or a carefully crafted hoax? This is the case that put Ed and Lorraine Warren on the map and in the crosshairs of skeptics forever. Let's unlock the front door and see what's inside, huh? Before the ghosts, before the slime, before the flies, there were 6 bodies. On November 13th, 1974, 23-year-old Ronald DeFeo Jr. walked into a bar in Amityville, New York, and announced, "I think my mother and father are shot." Police raced to 112 Ocean Avenue and found the DeFeo family murdered in their beds. Father, mother, and 4 siblings, all shot execution style with a .35 caliber rifle. No signs of struggle, just horror. DeFeo later confessed, claiming voices in the house told him to kill. He would later change his story multiple times, blaming demons, the mob, even his sister. But the damage was done. DeFeo House was just another Dutch colonial in the suburbs. Now it was stained by one of the most brutal familicides in American history. 1 year later, a new family moved in, and things got weird fast. In December 1975, George and Kathy Lutz, newly married with 3 kids, bought the house for a steal, $80,000 for a property that should have gone for twice that. They knew about the murders, but they claimed it didn't bother them until it did. They lasted 28 days, and according to the Lutzes, the house turned into a walking nightmare. A priest who tried to bless the home reportedly heard a voice say, "Get out!" A mysterious green slime oozed from the walls. Swarms of flies appeared in winter. Doors were ripped from their hinges. George began waking at 3:15 a.m., the time the DeFeo murders were said to have happened. He claimed to hear marching band music and seeing glowing red eyes staring in through the windows. Kathy levitated. Their daughter made friends with an invisible demonic pig named Jody. They fled the home, leaving their belongings behind. They did what any terrified family would do. Why not? They hired a book agent. In 1977, Jay Anson's The Amityville Horror was published. It was billed as a true story. It became a massive bestseller and sparked a media frenzy. 2 years later, the film adaptation terrified audiences with bleeding walls and a house that seemed to breathe. And right in the middle of it all, Ed and Lorraine Warren. In March 1976, a few months after the Lutzes fled, Ed and Lorraine Warren arrived at 112 Ocean Avenue with a TV crew, a psychic, and a team of investigators. They weren't working for the Lutzes, they were there independently, drawn by the demonic rumors. Lorraine later claimed she immediately sensed an overwhelming evil presence. Ed, who never entered a house without a relic of protection, felt it too. Their team took photos, including the now infamous demonic boy photo, an image that supposedly shows a ghostly child peeking out from a bedroom doorway with glowing eyes. Creepy? Definitely. Proven? Not so much. The Warrens declared the house diabolically infested. Ed said, "This is no ordinary haunted house. This house is a psychic slum. It's an embarrassment to modern science." Their findings would become part of a growing Amityville legend. But they weren't the only ones writing chapters. From the start, critics smelled something rotten in Amityville, and it wasn't ghost slime. Investigative journalist Rick Moran dug into the case and found inconsistencies everywhere. See, the priest the Lutzes said was physically attacked denied most of their story. Neighbors never reported strange phenomena. No physical damage matched the Lutzes' claims either. The Lutzes took a lie detector test and passed, but critics pointed out the test was arranged by their own legal team. Even more damaging, William Weber, the DeFeo family's defense attorney, later admitted he collaborated with the Lutzes to fabricate the haunting to sell a book and help his client plead insanity. His quote, "We created his story over many bottles of wine." That didn't stop the money from rolling in. Ed and Lorraine stood by the haunting until their deaths. They insisted the house was held in a dark, inhuman presence, and the evidence was undeniable. Lorraine reportedly refused to ever return, saying it was one of the only cases that truly terrified her. But skeptics argue the Warrens were too quick to label events as demonic, and too involved in the media spectacle to be taken seriously. Many see their involvement as opportunistic, a couple jumping on a growing legend to cement their reputation. Still, for believers, their role was crucial. They gave the case religious weight. They made it about cosmic forces of evil, not just creaky pipes and psychological trauma. Now, what's left behind? Well, today, the infamous house on Ocean Avenue still stands, but its address has been changed to throw off all thrill seekers. Just imagine how many people try to go and see this house. It's been owned by several families since the Lutzes, and none of whom have reported anything paranormal. So what happened? Was it a haunting fueled by genuine supernatural trauma? Was it a case of collective delusion brought on by grief, stress, and suggestion? Or a brilliant fabrication built on tragedy, media hype, and a savvy sense of storytelling? So what do you think? Drop your theories in the comments and tell me, what do you think? And would you spend the night in the Amityville house? I think I would. Anyway, if this episode gave you goosebumps, hit that like button, exorcise that, subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss our next deep dive. I'm Jorge, and this is Jorge's House of Horrors. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Jorge's House of Horrors, your favorite midnight hangout for everything that bumps, crawls, and screams in the night. I'm your host, Jorge, and tonight we're digging into a case so strange it forced the American legal system to stare the supernatural dead in the eye. A man murdered someone. That much is a fact, but when it came to explain why, he didn't blame rage, alcohol, or mental illness. He blamed the devil. This is the true story behind The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It. You've seen this movie. This was a case involving an alleged demonic possession, a brutal killing, and Ed and Lorraine Warren's attempt to put the paranormal on trial. Let's dim the lights and open the case file. Our story begins not with a murder, but with a haunting. In 1980, the Glatzel family moved into a new rental home in Brookfield, Connecticut. Soon after, their 11-year-old son, David, began acting strangely. He claimed to see a man with big black eyes, a thin face, animal features, jagged teeth, pointed ears, and hooves. He said this entity threatened to steal his soul and drag him to hell. Classic demonic symptom checklist? You betcha. David reportedly began having night terrors. He was growling like an animal, speaking Latin phrases he had no way of knowing, and exhibiting knowledge of things he shouldn't have. He would lash out violently, often speaking in multiple voices. His family, terrified and very, very Catholic, called a priest. When the church's initial blessings didn't help, they turned to the only people they thought could battle what they believed was demonic. You got it. Ed and Lorraine Warren. By this point, the Warrens had built their reputation with cases like Amityville and the haunted Annabelle doll. But what they claimed to encounter in David was different. Ed believed David was the victim of a powerful demonic infestation, and Lorraine said she saw a black mist materialize next to the boy, something she took as a clear sign of an evil presence. The Warrens claimed David levitated, predicted future events, and at one point temporarily stopped breathing during an exorcism. They said multiple spirits were inside the boy, 43 to be exact, including one demon. The support of a few local priests, though the church never officially sanctioned a full exorcism, the Warrens organized several sessions. That's when things took a dark turn. One person who frequently was present during David's exorcisms was Arne Cheyenne Johnson, the 19-year-old boyfriend of David's older sister, Debbie. According to both the Glatzels and the Warrens, Arne made a fatal mistake during one of the sessions. As David convulsed and screamed, Arne challenged the demon, saying something along the lines of, "Take me on, leave the boy alone, come into me." And not long after, things started to change for Arne. On February 16th, 1981, Arne Johnson got into an argument with his landlord, Alan Bono, who was also a friend and an employer. Witnesses say Arne had been drinking, something unusual for him, and grew increasingly agitated. In a sudden outburst, Arne pulled out a pocket knife and stabbed Bono multiple times, killing him in front of Debbie and other witnesses. He fled, but was caught quickly. Everyone agreed he committed the murder, but when police asked why, Arne said he didn't remember. That's when Ed and Lorraine stepped in. Again. The Warrens told police and media that Arne had been possessed at the time of the murder. They pushed for a radical legal defense, not guilty by reason of demonic possession. Not guilty by reason of demonic possession. Just think about that. It's interesting. This was the first in U.S. legal history. The trial became a media circus. Newspapers dubbed it the Devil Made Me Do It case. Reporters flooded the courthouse. Public opinions were split. Was this a groundbreaking look at spiritual influence or the height of absurdity? Arne's defense attorney, Martin Manella, initially embraced the possession angle. He even planned to fly in an exorcism expert from Europe and subpoena the priests involved, but there was just one major problem. The court system doesn't recognize demons. The judge, Robert Callahan, ruled that possession was not a viable defense, stating that such a claim was irrelative and unscientific. He struck it from the official record. In the end, the defense shifted to self-defense. Despite the sensational claims, the court found Arne guilty of manslaughter, not murder. He was sentenced to 10 to 20 years, but served only 5. By all accounts, he was a model inmate. He married Debbie while in prison, and the two remained together for decades. After his release, Arne maintained he had no memory of the stabbing and continued to stand by the possession story. The Glatzel family, for the most part, supported the Warrens, but not everyone in the family agreed. Years later, David Glatzel's older brother Carl came forward with a very different version of the events. He claimed the entire thing was manipulated and exaggerated by the Warrens for profit. Carl said his younger brother David suffered from mental illness and that the possession narrative worsened his trauma. Carl eventually sued the Warrens and the author of The Devil in Connecticut, a book detailing the case for misrepresentation and emotional distress. He accused the Warrens of being opportunists, which, I mean, come on, claiming they exploited his family for fame and turned a real tragedy into supernatural entertainment. The Warrens, of course, denied the claims. Lorraine maintained until her death that Arne had been possessed and that they had tried to warn everyone of the danger. What was it? At the heart of this case is one haunting question. Can someone be driven to kill by supernatural force? I mean, if you believe the Warrens and the Glatzels, then yes, Arne offered himself up to a demon, and the murder that followed was not his doing. If you're more grounded, you might see a different story. A young man under stress, influenced by fear, religion, and suggestion, who snapped in a moment of rage. It happens. Alcohol was involved. The court never ruled on possession, but this case remains one of the most bizarre intersections of crime and the occult ever recorded. So what do you think? Did Arne Cheyenne Johnson murder under the influence of a demonic force, or was the only possession here just psychological and stress? Let me know what you think in the comments, especially if you've read The Devil in Connecticut or seen The Conjuring 3. I saw The Conjuring 3 and even the documentary they had on Netflix. Did it change how you view this case? Now, if this episode gave you chills, or maybe you want to sleep with a crucifix under your pillow, hit that like button, exercise that subscribe button, and ring the bell so you don't miss a thing. I'm Jorge, and this is Jorge's House of Horrors. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Jorge's House of Horrors, where we unravel twisted tales of the unexplained and sometimes the overexplained. I'm your host, Jorge, and we're going to hop across the Atlantic to dig into one of the most famous and most contested poltergeist cases of the 20th century. It's got everything. Disembodied voices, levitating kids, flying furniture, cold spots, cursed toys, and one family caught in the eye of a media hurricane. But like any good haunting, this one comes with a twist, because not everyone agrees on what really happened, including the people who claim to live through it. This is the story of the Enfield Poltergeist. It's August 1977 in Enfield, a working-class neighborhood in North London. Peggy Hodgson, a single mother of 4, calls the police after her daughters, Janet and Margaret, report strange goings-on in their bedroom. Furniture moving by itself, knocking on the walls, and voices that didn't belong to anyone in the house. At first, the police were skeptical, until one officer saw a chair slide across the room on its own. That's when things escalated from spooky to spotlight. Over the next several months, the Hodgson house became a media frenzy. The local newspaper ran daily updates. TV crews were invited inside, and British paranormal investigators, most notably Maurice Grosse and Guy Leon Playfair from the Society for Psychical Research, set up camp in the house. Their goal? To document what they believe was a genuine haunting. Here's what was reportedly observed. Loud knocks that responded to questions, objects flying across the room, cups, toys, furniture, stuff like that. Janet, the 11-year-old in the house, was said to levitate, captured in a famous photo mid-air. Disembodied voices speaking in guttural tones, one identifying itself as Bill, a man who died in the house years before. Cold spots and sudden temperature drops. Apparent possession episodes that left Janet speaking in different voices or contorting unnaturally. The investigators claimed to witness dozens of unexplained events. Some even believed Janet was being used as a conduit for something inhuman. But not everyone was convinced. Critics were quick to point out inconsistencies. The levitation photo looked suspiciously like a girl jumping off her bed, and the voices, well, Janet admitted she could do ventriloquism, and Playfair himself admitted the girls were caught faking activity on multiple occasions, but insisted that while some events were fabricated, others were beyond explanation. Even Janet, in later interviews, said about 2% of the events were faked, usually to test the investigators or get attention, but she maintained that the majority of the events were real. As the case grew, so did the attention. Reporters staked out the house. The public was divided. And then, about a year into the haunting, a new set of players arrived, straight from the US of A. Enter the Warrens. Ed and Lorraine Warren made a brief appearance at the Enfield house in 1978. And according to multiple sources, they weren't officially invited by the main investigators and only stayed for a short time, maybe like a day or two. But they quickly declared the house the site of demonic presence. That raised eyebrows, for sure. Guy Leon Playfair, who had spent months in the house, was blunt. He said Ed was only interested in making money from the case and that their involvement was exaggerated beyond recognition. In later retellings, especially in The Conjuring 2, and if you've seen that film, you'll see the Warrens portrayed as the central heroes. In reality, their role in Enfield was minor, and that just didn't stop their legend from growing. The Conjuring 2 turned the Enfield case into a full-blown Hollywood horror epic, complete with demonic nuns and flying furniture and heroic speeches. And while the film does what films do, condense and dramatize, it also reshapes the truth. In the movie, the Warrens are deeply involved. In reality, they were on the sidelines. That creative license has caused friction between filmmakers and actual paranormal researchers who feel the Warrens' role was massively inflated. But here's the thing. Even without the Hollywood treatment, the Enfield case was still weird. More than 30 witnesses, including journalists, police, and skeptics, reported seeing unexplainable phenomena. Was it a haunting? Was it mass hysteria, or just a family in crisis, or something far more human? So the skeptics will always chime in. Psychologists looking back at the case have pointed out that there were several key factors. Janet was entering puberty, a common thread in poltergeist cases. The family was under extreme emotional and financial stress, and the media attention may have reinforced and escalated their behavior. Some skeptics argue the entire thing was a complex coping mechanism, a subconscious way for Janet to express trauma, or a conscious attempt by the kids to gain attention in a chaotic household. Still, it's hard to explain all the evidence away. Some of the recordings remain unsettling, and those who were there, like Maurice Grosse, went to their graves believing it was real. And where are they now? Janet Hodgson largely avoided the spotlight after the events, but she resurfaced in later years to share her experience. She stands by most of it, but admits the pressure, media frenzy, and attention were overwhelming. As for the Warrens, the Enfield case became another feather in their spiritual cap, and even their involvement was brief. It was helping to solidify their brand internationally, and guess what? They got the Conjuring 2 out of it, so yeah, there we go. Anyway, what do you think? If this episode levitated your curiosity, hit that like button, subscribe to Jorge's House of Horrors, and ring that bell so you don't miss the next haunting. I'm Jorge, and this is Jorge's House of Horrors. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Jorge's House of Horrors, where the monsters are real, the ghosts are bold, and the stories are never as simple as they seem. I'm your host, Jorge, and today we're cracking open one of the most intense and disturbing cases in the Warrens' archive. Forget subtle bumps in the night. This case involved full-on assault, levitation, and an evil entity that didn't just haunt, it tormented. This is the story of the Smurl family haunting. A case that terrorized a quiet Pennsylvania neighborhood, made national headlines, and had both priests and scientists trying to explain what the hell was going on. So, let's dive into the demon next door. It's 1974, and Jack and Janet Smurl, a devout Catholic couple with 4 daughters, move into a duplex on Chase Street in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. They live on one side with their family. Jack's parents live on the other. At first, everything seems normal. But soon, things start to go wrong. Water stains bleed through freshly painted walls. Loud banging sounds echo through the house, often with no clear source. Appliances turn on and off by themselves. Rotten smells flood the rooms, and family members report being pushed, scratched, and even sexually assaulted by an unseen force. According to the Smurls, the haunting escalated slowly, starting with subtle disturbances and building toward violence. By 1985, they were desperate. They turned to the only people they believed could help, Ed and Lorraine Warren. When the Warrens arrived, they claimed to immediately sense a demonic presence in the house. Ed described the haunting as one of the most dangerous they had ever encountered. He said this wasn't just a ghost, it was a powerful, inhuman entity bent on destruction. Lorraine, in her trance sessions, said she saw a shadowy black form moving through the house. The Warrens reported cold spots, unexplained knocks, and violent outbursts. They brought in audio recorders, cameras, and a priest. According to their report, multiple exorcisms were attempted, but none were fully successful. See, the family claimed the demon followed them outside the home, even showing up at Jack's workplace. And then came the most disturbing claim of all: alleged demonic assault. Both Jack and Janet Smurl reported sexual assaults by the entity. Jack said he was attacked in bed by what he described as a succubus-like figure, a grotesque old woman with red eyes and claws. Janet claimed she too was physically attacked and levitated during the night. And it wasn't just them. One of their daughters and even Jack's elderly mother allegedly experienced encounters with the entity. These attacks were deeply personal and deeply traumatizing. By 1986, the story had broken wide. Local news outlets picked up on it, and then the national media came calling. The Warrens gave interviews, of course, never to shy away. The Smurls co-authored a book with writer Robert Curran titled The Haunted, One Family's Nightmare, which later inspired a made-for-TV movie. The Catholic Church, however, took a more cautious stance. A local priest, Father McKenna, performed exorcisms, but church officials later distanced themselves from the case, saying they found no evidence of supernatural activity. That didn't stop the Warrens, though. They claimed the church was afraid of negative publicity, and that the entity had mocked the priests, laughed at holy water, and refused to leave. Not everyone bought the story, though. Joe Nickel, a well-known paranormal investigator and skeptic, conducted his own analysis. He concluded the Smurls were likely experiencing a combination of stress, psychological suggestion, and confirmation bias, possibly fueled by religious beliefs and media attention. He pointed out that the claims conveniently escalated in sync with the media coverage, and that many of the experiences had no independent verification. In short, he said it was a classic moral panic in a household. Remember, this was during the Satanic Panic. Other critics noted that the family lived in a duplex, but only their side was haunted. Jack's parents, who lived on the other side of the wall, reported nothing unusual. That didn't stop the Smurls from sticking to their story. They said skeptics weren't there. They didn't feel what they felt and couldn't understand the fear. So what happened after this? Well, the Smurls eventually moved out in the late 80s and the disturbances stopped. That house has since changed hands multiple times and no further hauntings have been reported. The book, The Haunted, remains out of print but is considered one of the most disturbing accounts in the Warrens' career. But here's the question that lingers. Did the Smurls face down the real evil, or did they believe in something so deeply that it became real? I don't know. What do you think? Was this a tragic result of stress, sickness, and suggestibility amplified by one hell of a ghost story, or were they really under a demonic siege? Let me know what you think in the comments, especially if you've read The Haunted or seen the TV movie. Do you think the Smurls were victims of the supernatural force or psychological one? I don't know, but I think this is going to be the next Conjuring movie, so we'll see what they do in that film. So, if you like this episode, go ahead and smash that like button, summon that subscribe, and ring the notification bell so that you're ready for our next deep dive. This is Jorge, and this is Jorge's House of Horrors. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Jorge's House of Horrors, your twisted tour guide through tales of possession, poltergeist, and the power of belief. I'm your host, Jorge, and tonight we've arrived at the final episode of our Ed and Lorraine Warren deep dive. We're ending on one of their most gruesome and controversial cases, a house that was once a funeral home, a family tormented by shadow figures and necrophilic ghouls, and a haunting so disturbing it was adapted into a major horror film. But the scariest part, what may or may not have been fabricated. This is the story of the Snedeker House haunting, and I might have butchered that name, but forgive me for that, where grief, ghosts, and storytelling collide. And it all began in 1986 when Alan and Carmen Snedeker, financially struggling and desperate, moved their family into a rental home in Southington, Connecticut. They were relocating to be closer to the hospital where their eldest son, Stephen, was being treated for Hodgkin's lymphoma. Sounds like the beginning of a sad but ordinary story until the family discovered the home used to be a funeral parlor. That's right. Down in the basement were mortician's tools and a table for embalming and a lift system once used to move corpses from the basement to the viewing room upstairs. Creepy, yes, but according to the Snedekers, it got a lot worse. Not long after moving in, the family began experiencing classic haunted house symptoms. Cold spots, foul odors, apparitions of shadow figures and disfigured humans, lights flickering or turning off by themselves, doors opening and closing, whispers in the dark, and untraceable banging noises. But things escalated far beyond bumps in the night. Stephen, already weakened by cancer treatment, claimed he was being physically attacked by invisible forces. He described sexual assaults by an entity he said was a man in a suit with black eyes. He claimed the spirits tried to possess him, and eventually he began exhibiting disturbing behavior, becoming withdrawn, violent, and unstable. The family believed something in the house had targeted their sick son, and that energy of the funeral home had left a psychic strain on the property. That's when Ed and Lorraine Warren entered the picture. Surprise, surprise. The Snedekers reached out for help, and the Warrens answered the call. According to Lorraine, the house was infested with demonic entities drawn by the energy of the bodies once prepared there. She claimed the morticians had performed necromantic rituals, even acts of necrophilia, opening portals to evil forces that had never left. The Warrens brought in clergy for a formal exorcism, and according to their account, it worked. The evil was banished, and the Snedekers eventually moved out. The case was disturbing, terrifying, and perfect for a book. The case was documented in A Dark Place, the story of a true haunting, written by horror author Ray Garton in 1992, with the Warrens listed as collaborators. See, this is where things get a little messy. Years later, Garton went public saying he couldn't take the Warrens seriously and that the Snedeker family gave him conflicting, often incoherent stories. When he asked Lorraine how to reconcile them, she allegedly told him, "Make it up and make it scary." Garton said he did just that. He shaped the narrative into a terrifying, coherent ghost story because, in his words, that's what the Warrens wanted. Now, in 2009, the story was adapted into The Haunting in Connecticut. It was a glossy supernatural thriller featuring exorcisms, mutilated ghosts, and unhaunted walls. But the film took serious creative liberties, downplaying the sexual assault allegations and crafting a more Hollywood-friendly version of events. The real-life Snedeker family supported the film, but not all critics did. Enter the skeptics. Multiple investigators and journalists have questioned the entire Snedeker haunting. Here's why. No physical evidence was ever produced. The house's later tenants reported no paranormal activity. The most disturbing claims, necrophilia, possession, and attacks, are unsupported by official records. Stephen Snedeker, as an adult, later struggled with drug addiction and mental illness, calling into question how much of his experience could have been psychological. Skeptics also point out that the Warrens often followed a pattern: escalate the horror, assign it a demonic cause, and then document it for books, interviews, and for future adaptations. In this case, they're accused of leaning into shock value at the expense of the truth. So what was it? What really happened in the Snedeker house? Was it a genuine haunting rooted in the trauma of death and disease? A case of mental illness and psychological breakdown fueled by fear and stress? Or a fabricated tale shaped by desperation, suggestion, and a desire for fame or a paycheck? Even among the believers of the paranormal, the Snedeker case remains highly disputed and one of the most sensational in the Warrens' archive. I mean, what is your verdict? Did the Snedekers face down the real evil, or was this one more of the elaborate ghost stories ever told and sold to a publisher? Let's talk about it in the comments. And hey, if you've seen The Haunting in Connecticut, did it scare the hell out of you, or did it raise some serious red flags? Now, if you like that, go ahead and smash that like button, slam the subscribe, and ring that bell so you're first in line for our next spine-tingling story. I am Jorge from Jorge's House of Horrors. Thank you for joining me.